All right. Today's speaker is James Skibo, who's the Wisconsin State Archaeologist at the Wisconsin Historical Society. He received his bachelor's degree from the Northern Michigan University, where he was first introduced to archaeology. He earned a master's degree and PhD at the University of Arizona, where he developed an interest in prehistoric pottery. For 27 years, he was a professor at Illinois State University, where he was awarded the distinction of Distinguished Professor. He has written or edited 11 books and dozens of peer-reviewed articles on pottery, archaeological theory, and archaeology of the Great Lakes. Today he is going to talk with us about the discovery, recovery, and restoration of the Mendota Dugout Canoe, last year which received worldwide attention and was selected as one of the top 10 archaeological discoveries of the world in 2021. We look forward to your presentation, Dr. Skibo, and we've made a contribution to the Rotary International Polio Plus Fund as a way to say thanks for speaking with us today. I also want to mention that we'll have a Q&A with our speaker at the end as time allows, but please wait for the microphone if you have any questions. So let's give Dr. James Skibo a warm welcome to our podium. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Most of that is correct, I think. First of all, you're probably wondering what the heck the state archaeologist is and what. Just closer. And what does he do? I'm still figuring that out. I'm about a year in. I'm still figuring out. But one of the important things we do is that our office is in charge of preserving and protecting the 36,000 archaeological sites in the state of Wisconsin. Most people don't know that. It's one of the richest sites in terms of archaeological resources, which includes an extensive underwater resource. And you may have heard recently, last fall, the Shipwreck Maritime Sanctuary was established. It's co-managed with our state and the Wisconsin Historical Society with NOAA, so that's a big new thing that's happened. But I'm here to talk about the canoe. Before today, how many people have heard about the canoe? So I will try not to talk, we can spend some more time for questions because it as Paul said, it was voted as one of the top 10 archaeological discoveries in the world, which is unusual for, I think, the first time that's happened in Wisconsin, and one of the few times it's happened even in the United States. So it was a great discovery, and there's more to come, I hope. So I should mention that Christian Overland, the director of the Wisconsin Historical Society, is here, so and he's a member, and he's part of this story, so you can ask him questions as well. Though I'm going to take out my dirty jokes because my boss is here, so I'm not going to. So when I arrived here in July of last year, my team kept talking about that Tammy Thompson, our one of our maritime archaeologists, had discovered a canoe in Lake Mendota, and we would have weekly, sometimes daily meetings about things. And this canoe kept coming up, and I said, finally, well, show me some pictures of this. And when I saw it, I said, wow, that does look like a canoe. And but I was a little bit suspicious because it's unusual to have wood survive very long in our lakes. And so I talked to a Christian about it, and we decided to go down and get a carbon-14 date from the canoe. And I'll get to that in a minute, but here is one of the first pictures that Tammy Thompson took of the canoe, and you can see on her underwater notebook that she said, I think it's a canoe. What does it say? I found a canoe? A dugout canoe. And she was off the book. She was diving on a Saturday with something she calls a scooter, which is a self-propelled, and she was going along what's called the bank in Lake Mendota. And she, because she's a expert in really maritime archaeology and mostly shipwreck archaeology. When she sees wood on the bottom, she's curious. So she went down and uncovered it, and she found what looked to her like a canoe. And not only that, it had some artifacts in it. This is some of the simplest artifacts. We know now they're net sinkers. This is if you're going to have a net, you want the top of it floating with gourds, the bottom of it weighted down with net sinkers. They're very simple tools, just simply notched that are tied to the bottom. So that made it more intriguing, the fact that it had some known sort of pre-contact artifacts. And so after talking about it enough, I said, well, let's go see to make sure that it is an old canoe, because one thing that archaeologists hate most is to be fooled. And there's all kinds of trickery in the archaeological record. So we went down and got a carbon-14 date. Tammy went down and got a carbon-14 date. And we sent it back, and it came back as basically AD 800 approximately. That's 1,200 years old, which makes it the largest, mostly intact dugout canoe in Wisconsin. And it was and so when I got this date, I told our team, and I talked to my supervisor, and then we walked right to Christian's office, and he said, wow, like you would say, I think, and he said, that's pretty cool. What do you think we should do? I said, well, it's significant. There's nothing like it that's this intact, and now that it's exposed to the water, not buried anymore, it's beginning to decay and erode quickly. And I think we should take it out. So to Christian's effort, the whole society really got involved in this from top to the bottom. We established a canoe team, and we had 6 weeks from that date to come up with a plan to pull it out. And nothing like this has ever been done in archaeology, maritime archaeology, to pull out a canoe from 27 feet below the water. And so it was a big deal. And Christian said, yeah, let's go try to get it out. We contacted all of our tribal partners, informed them about this, because this is a canoe likely that was paddled by the ancestors of the Ho-Chunk or some other local tribe. So we contacted them, and they were okay with us extracting it because it's going to disappear. And so first it was still sort of buried in the soil. And that's Tammy Thompson. You'll see here more in this, but she's a Hall of Fame diver, and she sort of led the sort of extraction planning. And we stayed up late for 6 weeks and came up with a plan. And the team also includes Caitlin Zant, another underwater archaeologist, and Amy Roseborough, who, like me, is more of an on-the-land archaeologist. And the four of us, along with help and consulting with others, came up with a plan to extract it and to remove it and pull it out. We also used the Dane County dive team, and they were thrilled to help out because usually when they go in the water, they're looking for a dead body. So they were thrilled. They use it as a training session. We also used a couple volunteers who have experience in this kind of thing. And one of the things we were concerned about is that if there were artifacts associated with it besides the net sinkers, so we did what's called dredging, basically sucking up the sediment with a large hose, the divers are, and Amy Roseborough and I are sifting through the sediment to see if there's any additional artifacts. There were none. And so we moved faster, and Tammy got her favorite tool. It's like a power washer, and went down there and was able to extract the canoe after a couple of days of work to get it loose. And when she did, it kind of wanted to float. So then she tied it down, and then that was 2 days before the extraction date. It was a cold November day, is how I remember it. And there was ice on the dock, there was ice on the boat, and we went out. The reason why we did it this time is the water starts to clear up a little bit in November in Lake Mendota, and we wanted to get it out before winter and before spring and before, because who knows what would have happened if it would have made it through the winter. Here you see some action shots of the Dane County divers that helped us out. So it was Caitlin, Tammy, the 6 members of the Dane County dive team, a volunteer, and they went down and put these flotation tubes around it. We first built this kind of sling, worked it underneath, hooked these flotation tubes up, bags up, and brought it to the surface. And meanwhile on shore, that's Amy Roseborough you see there, who I mentioned previously. Some members of the press were invited, just a select few, because, quite frankly, I didn't know how this was going to go. And it could go back down to the bottom. And also, we didn't know how long it would take. It actually took us about 4 hours or so from when we went out before we brought it out. And it was, as I mentioned, it was kind of cold, and everybody was sitting there shivering, including Christian and other members of the Wisconsin Historical Society. And then local people started to just congregate. You could see us offshore, and I was texting Amy and telling her what was going on because it was taking a while. And then we finally brought it out, and we floated it to the point where the boat could get, and then the last 100 yards or so we walked it in. And this is a moment that I'll never forget, because I've discovered lots of cool things in my career, but now as the public archaeologist, the people's archaeologist, I like to say, we do things more visibly and with the public and tribal affiliation. And by that time, maybe 100 people were on shore, sitting there waiting. And when we pulled it out, people clapped, people cried. It sort of taught me something that moment, that, when you get people engaged in the process, it becomes a bigger deal. There's a good picture of Christian and Bill Quackenbush, who's been very supportive. He's the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for the Ho-Chunk. I should also mention that he, this summer, built a dugout canoe with his youth, and we floated across Lake Mendota, and we visited the site of the canoe, and we had a little presentation to the people that floated, and then they came down the Yahara River and they visited the canoe at the State Archival Preservation Facility. And as mentioned, it was news literally around the world. Again, I've never experienced something like this. Within over 2 days, we were news around the world. We were on CNN, and it was an amazing experience. The Conservation Department helped us get the canoe across Madison to the State Archival Preservation Facility. And just an inside thing, I was thinking one of us could ride in this trailer, but the DNR has its rules, and we couldn't ride in the trailer. So I think the caption there captured how I was afraid that the canoe was going to break in half. It had come out intact, and I thought, well, you know how the Madison roads are. And I should mention the mayor was there too, so I mentioned the roads to her as well. Prior to the canoe coming out, we had to figure out a way to preserve it, and you do that in a vat that we created with Scott Roller of our collection team. We went out and looked for contractors. I should have, if I had the rotary list, I could have called one of you. We needed somebody who could build a vat. I called a bunch of people, and they said, well, we could do it in six months or 3 months. You know how hard it is to get a carpenter. And so, to the surprise of all my new colleagues, I said, well, I could build it. And Scott helped, and we built this thing based upon a design from Texas A&M, and it now sits in the room. How many people have seen the canoe at SAFE? Wow, that's amazing. So you've seen it there. So you can ask questions to all these people that have seen this. And so we built this, and now it lies, here it is, here we're carrying it in. We didn't know how heavy it was going to be. We thought there's been canoes that have come out that have been 1,000 pounds. This one turned out to be 300 pounds. So we had devised a mechanical means to put it into the vat. But as it turns out, we were lucky enough to be able to simply carry it, which was great. Gosh, now in March, we pulled it out for the first time. We laid it down in the vat in the water, and we pulled it out I think it was 3 months ago. And then we cleaned it and we scanned it with the help of Lennon Rogers in the Mechanical Engineering College. We scanned it because we wanted to do because it's going into water now. It's not going to come out for over 2 years as the preservation process continues, and I'll tell you how that works. Here's the scanning taking place. I should also mention every movement we made about the canoe, including our Zoom meetings, were filmed by a documentary film crew hired by the society. Again, I was really proud to be a part of a society that took this canoe discovery so, they thought it was important enough that we hired a documentary film crew, which is still working for us. And in fact, if you Google YouTube and Mendota Dugout Canoe, there's a 3-minute video that's really good, and I recommend it because I look much better in the video than I do here. Sounds smarter. I mean, I don't know. They did a great job. And so now we have an exact replica of the canoe that digitally that we can reproduce, and you can actually print out, 3D print out little ones and big ones. You could print out a real size one. And one of my goals is to make one out of white oak. This canoe was made out of white oak, by the way. And we have the capabilities to now, since we've scanned it like this, to recreate the canoe. And I'll put this right here. You can come up and look at it and pick it up if you like. And this is another scan just done with in photography. So this is what the canoe looks like. You notice that it's sort of blackened on the inside. That's the result and evidence of how it was manufactured. Because if you think about making a canoe with, especially white oak, which is a very hard wood, with stone tools, it's very difficult. The way it was done is you would burn the inside with hot grease or something, and get it charred, and then just bash it out with these big tools. And eventually, when you got it down to where you wanted, you would use sharpened chert tools or stone tools and remove the rest of the wood. There's two things I want to point out here besides the charring. That's the hole in one end, and also the part that's sort of degraded on the other end. That's the part was sticking out of the bottom of the lake when Tammy found it. That's the part that was being eroded because it was exposed now to the water. The reason why this canoe lasted this long is because it has been buried for most of its 1,200 years, and so it was just it gets to be it's luck just to find it. So if we hadn't taken it out, it's likely the whole thing would have broken up in a short time. Now we're undergoing the preservation process. It's in purified water right now in the vat, but then gradually a substance that we refer to as PEG or polyethylene glycol will be added to it. We wanted to start it sooner than this, but there's some supply chain problems with polyethylene glycol, because one thing that polyethylene glycol is used for is if you got the Moderna shot, you got some polyethylene glycol in your arm, so it's had other uses. But it's a waxy-like material that will replace the water in the dugout canoe, because the only thing holding the canoe together is the water inside the cellular structure. So gradually we have to replace the PEG with water through osmosis. It'll take about 2 years. And so little by little, the PEG will be added. We'll monitor it by we have some fragments of it by weighing these fragments. And then at the end of the 2 years, when we reach a certain percentage of PEG, It'll be wrapped up and shipped to Texas A&M University, where they have a freeze dryer big enough to hold the canoe, which is about 15 feet long. And then there they'll freeze dry it at minus 42 degrees for about a week. And it'll remove the rest of the water, and then it'll be ready for more research and display. We've had some visitors, and you could see Tammy Thompson on the right, and Caitlin Zant on the left, Amy Roseborough, and then the two people in the middle you might recognize, and Senator Baldwin, I believe, is coming here soon. This month, I think, next week. And so we've had lots of visitors, and including some of you. So thank you for stopping by. There's a good picture of it on the lower right of this canoe in the vat. Just some real quickly about the context. Because you live in Madison, you probably know that there's lots of effigy mounds around Madison. It's probably literally there were hundreds of effigy mounds around Lake Mendota and the other three lakes. Charles E. Brown, really the first person that kind of had my job, really. He was responsible for preserving and protecting the ones that we have today. There's none in Milwaukee because no one had the foresight to do that. Well, there's one, but in Madison we've got quite a few preserved effigy mounds. And so if you're familiar with the Black Hawk Country Club near, it's the southwest part of Lake Mendota, and the things that look like little houses are former prehistoric villages, probably not there anymore. And then you could see effigy mounds. There's an effigy mound right on the golf course. There's a couple in the golf course, and the star indicates where the canoe was located, about 200 yards offshore. And I can take some questions if you'd like. Did you say you wanted a microphone, or do you want me to repeat the question? Okay.
I've done this before. Wait a minute. Hi, thanks for the history. There's a big ship that sank and was preserved in Stockholm Harbor, the Vasa. Have you worked with them on preservation techniques? I think there are things they wish they'd have known then when they did stuff.
We are, there's nobody in our historical society that does this kind of preservation, but we've hired a consultant from the University of Maryland who's really, I think, the top person in this kind of preservation, and she has been instructing us in how to proceed. For example, the freeze drying is kind of a brand new thing. They used to just put peg into it, but then the surface would be kind of waxy and sometimes even drip. So the freeze drying permits you to put in less peg. We've also been working with Peter Fix from Texas A&M, who'll do the freeze drying. So I think we have world famous consultants that are consulting us at this time. There aren't that many people that specialize in this kind of thing, but the woman, I'm blanking on her name, but actually she's in the State Historic Preservation Office in Maryland.
Is there any evidence for why the canoe sank?
This is something that we're working on. There's a couple of possibilities. It's found in quite deep water. Canoes, when people used canoes in the past, they would sink them in the fall, weigh them down, and so then the ice would freeze over the top of them, so it would hide them and protect them. And then in the spring, they'd pull them up, dry them out slightly. And so the canoes that we find in North America are ones that people never found again. And so they're, especially in Florida, they have a lot of dugout canoes when they drained a couple of lakes because, for whatever reason, they never came back to their canoe. This one was found in deeper water with associated artifacts, presumably there was a net attached to this boat, and it was a fishing boat, and so it may have sunk. Maybe the hole in it has something to do with it. Maybe, you know, we're not sure. The other possibility is that the Lake Mendota water level has fluctuated considerably. I mean, they call it the most studied lake in the world, but I'm finding that's not true. So we're probably going to start a project to reconstruct the ancient shorelines. We know that there were 6 major drought events where the Yahara River would have stopped in the past 6,000 years, literally dried up. But these are major drought events. None of them coincide with the date of the canoe. And so, but in speaking with others, it's without a dam at the Tenney Park and with the Yahara River not being having a huge watershed, even 1 year of a drought or active beavers that making dams, the Yahara River could stop and the water could come down. So maybe the canoe's at the bottom of this. There's a huge bench and then it drops. The canoe's found down here, but it could have slid down and been in 15 feet of water, or rather it could have been in 2 feet of water when the water was lower, the water came up, and then once it was that deep, they couldn't recover it, you know. It's just too hard to bring up.
Thank you for your presentation. I wanted to ask about what it was used for, and you just partly answered that. Just fishing, maybe also transportation, anything else, ceremonial, do you know?
I don't know. This is the first evidence of fishing in the inlands with nets. So it's a fishing boat. So certainly transportation. Lake Mendota in the Madison area was really a hub. It's a hub. Everybody likes to live here now. People like to live there 1,200 years ago too. And not only did they live here, it was a place where people congregated on a yearly basis. There's 2 types of effigy mounds in Wisconsin. One from sort of the Milwaukee area, one that's a different design, and one's kind of from the La Crosse area. But in Madison, we have both types equally. So it was a coming together. So people from all over, no doubt, came here. And the effigy mounds are part of burial rituals. So who knows? They probably use the canoes just like we do. But it's an important artifact because you think how long it would take to cut down a tree and hew out a piece of white oak. Hundreds and hundreds of hours. So.
Hi, could you tell us about the experience of being underwater for those 4 hours? And what that was like and what you went through?
I can't tell you. I was above water. And even the divers, they were up and down, and talking. I actually subsequently have become a diver, and just because I supervised divers and I just inherited all this equipment, I thought, why not? But our divers, this was nothing for our divers in terms of being underwater. They dived down to 300 feet, which is not, you know, and even farther. So 27 feet was really nothing for them. And they weren't down for 4 hours. A lot of our 4 hours were, we came across from where we went to the beach at Spring Harbor, and it took over an hour to go a quarter mile because we were going really slow because the waves got big and it was bouncing around, and I was worried, thinking it was going to go glug, glug, glug down to the bottom again. So we took a lot of time just transporting it. Okay.
All right. Thank you very much. Excellent presentation, and this is a very important find. Would you spend just a few minutes, just a little bit of time telling us about the preservation facility? Because clearly the preservation facility that we've only had for the last couple of years is critically important for the kinds of work that we're able to do now with these kinds of finds.
Well, that's a good question. That sounds like something that Christian Oberlin can answer too. But it's a state-of-the-art facility. It was built specifically for this kind of stuff, for storing things. If you visit it, they have one of the largest film, it's one of the largest film repositories in the country, and it's kept at 45 degrees, where I've also been keeping the pieces of canoe, because it's, you need to keep it cold, the tiny pieces for carbon-14. If you've not been there, you should try to get on one of the tours. There's nothing like it in the country. I'm happy to have the canoe there. And it was made much easier because of the way, I mean, if we hadn't had that facility, I don't know what we would have done, because a large object like this, you know, they have the facilities to bring in large things and transport them inside. It's right next to the Wienermobile, you know. I mean, it's... Oh, one of the things that's quite unique, and you know, we're quite proud of, and the tribes are quite proud of, is something called the Tribal Care Suite. As you probably know, occasionally artifacts, especially human remains, get repatriated back to the tribe, and it's a ceremonial and sacred and important event, and that takes place in a spot that was especially built for this, where they can have a smudging. The furniture is made from a wood from the Menominee Reservation. It's some of the best woodworking I've ever seen, and it's a place that's especially set aside only for that activity. And because of COVID, you know, I've discovered that not a lot of tribes even have seen it yet. So part of the neat thing is when new visitors come and they could see that. It's phenomenal. And it really, there probably are facilities like this, but I haven't been seeing them, so it's pretty cool. Just the Smithsonian. There you go, just the Smithsonian, and I'm sure ours is better.
Thank you for all of that great info.
Could you say a little bit more about how it was found in the first place?
Tammy Thompson, who's a remarkable woman in many ways. She can weld, she's got a Harley, and she is the best diver, I think, in North America. She dives every weekend all year long, under the ice. She's trained most of the divers, professional divers, in Wisconsin. And so, I mean, that thing might have been exposed for a long time at the end of that canoe. And it's a popular diving spot. In fact, I dove there in my training. It's a place where they train divers. And, you know, the problem with this Lake Mendota, and the reason we're lucky, I suppose, in some ways, that Lake Mendota is like soup for most of the year. It's just a couple months where the water's clear enough. But she had the foresight to check it out. We sent her down this week, again, and there was 6 inches of visibility to do something. And Caitlin Zant, to her credit, she said, "Nah, Tammy, why don't you go by yourself? Because it's sort of scary to go down when you can't see." And she found the canoe again and felt around and found it, or found the spot where it was. So it's because of her that she's an incredible diver, I think, is how it was found.
Okay, over here.
Yeah, thank you very much. 2 quick questions, Professor. One, white oak. I understood that later, but still early Ho-Chunk canoes were made out of basswood or birch. Was that a surprise to you archaeologists? And secondly, is there an estimate of how many fishermen might have been in such a canoe?
Yeah, 2 good questions. There's one small fragment of a canoe that's older, and it's also made out of white oak. So some of the older canoes seem to be white oak. And if you notice that, and some of the older canoes have this flattened sort of look. They don't have sides like modern day canoes. They're more like the paddle boards you see out, where they probably kneeled on them. And so, and there was, I forgot the second question. How many people? We made an estimate based on my favorite, math, and estimated that the cargo capacity would be about 200 to 300 pounds. And so it's a couple people probably. It's a two-person canoe with some fish.
Thank you for speaking today, Dr. Skibo. That was really awesome, and it's fantastic to be able to come to Rotary and hear incredible speakers and people's archaeologists like yourself coming out here today. So thank you for that. Appreciate your time for doing that. I really want to say thanks to the program committee for arranging speakers like this. This is the kind of things that you can get when you can come out to Rotary. So they've had really, I think, just an outstanding slate of speakers lately. So I really appreciate the work that they put into that. And thanks for attending. It's peak vacation time, so it's great to see so many people come out when we've had so many people gone. Masks or no masks, it just feels good to connect with friends. And I hope that you enjoyed the taco bar, something a little bit different. So thanks to the Park Hotel for shifting instead of just salmon or chicken, or something different tonight. So I appreciate that for them. So there we go. All right, and I hope you join us next Wednesday here at the Park Hotel. We're going to hear from James Bugle, who will tell us all about the Dane County Farmers Market. I know you will find it very interesting. It's a good time to ask a friend or a colleague to come out and join us for lunch next week. And that's all we have for this week, so thanks again to our sponsors, Yeet, Scott, Mike, and Wagner CPAs. I appreciate your support. And with that, we are adjourned.